Hello everyone and welcome to Shark Day 2020, where we'll be raising awareness for lots of different shark species and showcasing some of the amazing research that we do here on sharks at the University of Exeter. So joining me today is my Shark Day 2020 co-host, Jade Getliff. Jade, how are you doing?
I'm great, thank you.
How have you been coping then during this crazy lockdown? Has it affected the work that you've been doing or anything like that?
Yeah, unfortunately, the pandemic did cut my field season a little short. So I was out in Galapagos collecting my data from November, and unfortunately at the end of February that all came to a halt. But I think I got enough for what I need to do this year, so that's really good news. Yeah, and it's definitely brought about some challenges, but I think we're managing to overcome those quite well.
I heard it was a little bit stressful for you getting back. That must have been difficult. What happened?
Yes, very stressful. So essentially in the space of an afternoon, we heard that we could no longer do our field work and that the islands were closing down and we could not leave. So the Galapagos is a group of small islands off the coast of Ecuador. So no flights means you're not going anywhere. So that was quite difficult, and I was trying for a number of months to get back out, to get home, to be able to see my family again. But after a few months of trying, I could finally get out and come back.
It must have been
So
really stressful being in a foreign country during a time like that as well. I would have been a little bit stressed, so I don't blame you for being a little bit stressed, definitely. So I kind of wanted to ask, what got you interested in shark research? So before you were more heavily involved with turtle stuff, I know you did a lot of stuff in Cyprus, but now you've kind of shifted more towards sharks. What kind of brought on that change?
Yeah, so during my undergraduate degree, I worked a lot with Brendan Godley at the university and Annette Broderick doing some work with turtles out in Cyprus, which I absolutely loved, and that's what I did my undergraduate thesis on. Which was amazing. We were looking at how different environmental factors might affect nesting success. Mm-hmm. But with sharks have always been like my number one true love. I think they're absolutely incredible animals. And I really wanted to branch into something different and use some of the skills that I learned from my work with turtles and my undergraduate and apply those to a different field and learn some more about different groups of animals that are really important in ecosystems.
Do you think you had kind of like a breakthrough moment where you thought, oh, I just want to work with sharks now? Was there, do you have an experience in the water with them where you were like, this is amazing, I want to do this?
Oh, absolutely. I was so fortunate during my undergraduate that I could go on a field course to the Galapagos, and I went scuba diving there, and I was just surrounded by these amazing scalloped hammerheads, like exactly like your background. Maybe more than 100, getting so close to me, such large, beautiful, majestic, calm animals. And I was like, oh, I really need to work with these creatures. They're just absolutely beautiful. And just all sharks in general, and the rays as well, gorgeous animals. So I really wanted to learn more about them and do some work to hopefully protect them a bit further as well.
The Galapagos just sounds like an absolutely amazing place to do shark research. I'm actually very, very jealous of you. So you're an MbyRes student here at the University of Exeter. How's it going so far?
Of course, the pandemic has put the brakes on a few things and presented a few challenges that have meant that plans have changed. Plans always should be able to be flexible to change, and it's definitely been something that's tested me a lot. But I also feel so privileged to be able to do the project that I designed and I wanted to do, and that's what doing an MbyRes, that's what attracted me to doing an MbyRes with Exeter, is that kind of the ball was in my court. But that also means that there have been challenges, of course.
Who are your supervisors?
So I'm supervised by Camille Bono, and my secondary supervisor is Andy Russell as well. So they do a lot of work out in the Galapagos. And Camille is more of a molecular biologist and disease biologist. And we sort of pair our knowledge together of me being a marine biologist and Camille having molecular techniques to try and form this project together and trying to use novel techniques to to try and protect these amazing animals.
So I think all of us are itching to hear a little bit more about the research that you've been doing in the Galapagos on sharks. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
Yeah, so my project uses genomic techniques, so data that we can gather from sequencing the genome of these creatures. And to do that, I collect little tissue samples. And we often do these on the juveniles that come into the mangrove areas when they're born, and they hang around there for a few months, and that's when we can really have the opportunity to get close enough to be able to get these tiny little samples, very, 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 very small. And with that, we can extract the DNA and sequence the genome and use something called single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are little changes in the sequence of base pairs in the genome, and that tells us so much about population connectivity, diversity, size, even if a population is sort of genetically distinct from another. And we're hoping to use that to map where the populations of these animals are and if they're interacting with each other or not, and even hopefully try and find out how many there are as well. That information is invaluable for managing the Galapagos Marine Reserve and trying to understand how vulnerable these tiny little populations truly are, because we really don't know much about, especially some of the rays out there. It's very difficult to kind of to track rays, as well as some species of shark, and these techniques are really non-invasive, and they're a great way to try and look back over many generations to try and figure out what's going on and how vulnerable these guys really are.
Have you got any kind of crazy field stories while you were out there? Did anything a bit mad happen?
Yeah, lots of mad things happen in field research. Anyone will tell you. I'm sure that you've got a load as well. I have had a little bit of a nibble from a baby shark before. Entirely my fault. You can't blame the animals. I'm not scarred. I've got all my limbs. I'm absolutely fine.
Better to have a nibble from a baby shark than an adult shark, that's for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And it really reminds you that the respect you need to hold for these animals, and how careful you have to be when working with them, for sure. Yeah, so I did get a little nibble, but the little fella swam away quite happily after that.
So how important are the Galapagos Islands as a whole for shark and ray conservation?
So the Galapagos Islands is called, not officially but by lots of people, as a shark sanctuary. So in the marine reserve, the protections are quite strong. We have rangers out in the marine reserve patrolling it. The sharks are quite safe, and industrial fishing just basically doesn't exist out there. So that's why it is a shark sanctuary, and the rich waters brought in by the Humboldt current and the Panama current create these amazing upwellings full of lots of nutrients that basically makes these ecosystems so rich in life and attracts all these huge predators like the scalloped hammerheads to come and prey, which is why they're just so important. And it is a safe haven for sharks. When sharks come into the reserve, we know they're safe, but unfortunately big predators like scalloped hammerheads, they don't just stick around in the Galapagos Marine Reserve. And we know from tracking studies done in the past that they go up to Costa Rica, they go all over the place, and that's when they become vulnerable. And that's when, in the past there have been shipments of fins and meat that we have been able to use genomic techniques to track it back to sharks that are from the Galapagos. But if we can use these genomic techniques to show that yes, these animals are going further afield, these animals are mixing genetically with animals outside of the marine reserve, perhaps there's scope to widen the protections.
So what kind of threats are these sharks and rays facing when they leave the Galapagos? Is it fisheries-based threats mainly, or anything else?
Yeah, commercial fishing, well, illegal fishing actually, of the scalloped hammerheads in particular, is a big problem. Their fins are very valuable, and there's been a lot of illegal fishing activity. Well, not a lot, but definitely a few notable incidents that have been recorded just outside of the marine reserve, which is really unfortunate. But also where industrial fishing practices are allowed, things like long lining, sharks are vulnerable to bycatch, of course, and entanglement and ingestion, which of course you know a lot about.
Which I'm sure we'll hear about in another video at some point.
Oh, definitely.
So you mentioned genomics there. You've mentioned it a couple of times. Can you explain for people at home what genomics is and how important a tool it is for shark and ray research and conservation?
Yeah, so genomics is essentially the study of the genome. So it goes wider than specific genes, it goes wider than genetics. That's why it's called genomics. So we're using the entire genome, which gives us so much more information. It's really valuable as a tool because we can learn a lot across many generations. For example, putting a satellite tag on an animal might tell you where it's been in that very brief moment of its life, which is also so informative. But looking at the genome and how mutations have occurred and how they've been inherited and how these populations have been interacting gives us a much wider view of what's going on as well. It's less specific, so you can't tell that this ray was in this point at this time to mate. We can't say that, but we can look at the bigger picture, which is great. And it's also a really uninvasive way of doing research like that. We just need the tiniest little tissue sample. When we work on the sharks, we are in contact with them for less than a minute, and they recover fully. And that's why it's we can learn so much from taking so little and interacting so little with the animals, which I think is great.
Mm-hmm. From a kind of cost perspective as well, I mean, I don't know the costs of doing genomics, but compared to something like satellite tagging, which is notoriously expensive, is genomics a cheaper tool to use for shark conservation?
It is more cost effective, as we can get so much information. For example, from the money invested in sequencing that genome, we've got that data forever, and we can pick it, and we can use different things like not just single nucleotide polymorphisms, but lots of other information to answer other questions. For example, the inheritance of genes, and gather a greater understanding of the biology of these animals as well as the ecology.
Mm-hmm. I mean, your research sounds absolutely amazing, and I can't wait to read more about it. And I'm sure people at home can't wait to see more from you as well. Moving on, I know that you're super passionate about causes like women in science, and that's such an important passion to have, I think, for all of us to kind of promote women in science. Have you had any issues before as a woman working in shark research?
Well, yeah, I'm super passionate about this because I've had so many really strong female mentors throughout my entire time at university and my entire time in this sort of career path, who have really inspired me. I know like imposter syndrome is a big thing for everyone. It's always been a big thing for me, and I feel like as women in some cultures and in some environments, we might feel that a little bit more. I work with some amazing women who are so supportive, and I think it's really great to foster that kind of environment in this field. I guess shark science sort of gives off the impression that like, oh, they're vicious creatures, and you know you got to be strong to be able to work in that field, or and certain what's the word I'm looking for, sort of misconceptions about the field, I guess. And working in Galapagos definitely was a challenge in some respects, because I was very acutely aware that I was going into someone else's culture and I needed to be very respectful of that. And I feel like being a woman in charge of a team is something that's sort of like emerging as a kind of a new thing.
Yeah, I think it's a really important cause to get behind, and by doing what we're doing today, Shark Day 2020, we're trying to show as well that, you know, we have so many amazing women who are doing some unbelievable shark research here at the University of Exeter, and I think it makes it kind of more accessible to say, look, hey, you know, this is something you can do.
Yeah, definitely. I'm being very careful about the way I choose my words. But the important thing is, like, we are, through this event and through everything that I do and through the people that I work with and where I work, I'm really trying to empower other young women, especially, to get into this field who feel like it's a bit of a man's world. There are those misconceptions, and it is a very supportive community to be a part of, for sure. And I just want to make that known and aware that you will be supported as a woman in science in this field, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a cause that we can all get behind. So it's great to hear you talking about it. So excited to hear more about your research. You'll have to definitely keep us up to date as and when stuff starts coming out, because I'm sure everyone at home is really keen to hear more about some of the amazing shark stuff you've been doing in the Galapagos. Bringing this interview to a close, then, I've got a couple of questions from some school kids here in Florida. So one here from Tommy, who's 13. He attends Bridgewater Middle School here in Florida. His question is, what role do sharks play in the ecosystem? So I suppose in terms of the Galapagos, what kind of role are sharks playing there?
So sharks, typically, they sit right at the top of the food chain. They have top-down control of all of the different trophic levels of animals, which makes them super important for making it all work properly and ensuring things like food security. If sharks were to be removed from that top level, where they're having control over mesopredators and lower fish in that food chain, there would be these knock-on effects which we would feel in our everyday lives. For example, if sharks were removed, there'd be more mesopredators predating on the fish that we like to eat, and there won't be enough available for everyone. And that's definitely a massive role that they play in the food webs in Galapagos. Being such a productive environment, we need lots of big predators to keep everything in check. And also for the livelihoods of the people there in ecotourism. So in the local climate with that we're experiencing at the minute with the pandemic, the Galapagos has really struggled with the lack of tourism. One thing about having a shark sanctuary and protecting these sharks so well is that they bring in a lot of people like us who like to swim with them and like to dive with them and like to experience that. And for that, they're also so important to the local economy as well, not only for the ecosystem, but you know, the Galapagos really relies on that ecosystem working more so than I think some other places in the world, as such a tight-knit little group of islands. So sharks really are just immeasurably important for the Galapagos.
Awesome. And then another question here from Casey, who's 12. She also attends Bridgewater Middle School here in Florida. And she asks, do sharks swim in groups?
Yes, they do, as demonstrated by your lovely background there. Yes, they do swim in groups. Scalloped hammerheads especially are known for schooling together in their hundreds of thousands even. And it's thought that they might do this to find mates, and perhaps even as a defense mechanism from other larger predators. I mean, scalloped hammerheads are pretty much at the top, so I think the more viable theory is to find mates. But yeah, it's a super cool question, and experiencing it, like the video in the background, is amazing.
Awesome. Well, there you go, Casey. thank you very much then, Jade, for joining me today. Again, I'm super excited to read all about your research. So thanks so much for chatting with me. All of you at home, if any of you have any questions for Jade, be sure to comment them below. I'm sure she will answer them throughout the day. Remember, make sure to like, share, retweet every post that we do across all the ExeterMarine social media channels. That's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Cheers.